What's up, guys? Airsoft Man 819 here again. Haven't been on the review scene for a while. I just haven't been feeling it lately. I'm enjoying the warmer weather and stuff like that. I've just kind of had reviewer's block, which means I get up here and try to make a video and I just can't talk worth a crap. So I just haven't made any reviews lately. But I'm feeling pretty good about this one. I'm actually able to talk today, so I'm probably going to get this over with before I start messing things up again. So yeah, you're gonna have to transport yourself back to the early 2000s. Here at the Airsoft Man 819 channel, we travel back in time all the time. My DeLorean's parked outside. To the early 2000s. Now, the two dominant game systems at the time were the original Xbox and the PlayStation 2. And during that generation and prior generations, wired controllers were the primary controllers people used. Wireless controllers are not a new thing, okay? They've been around since the Atari 2600. The very first one was the wireless Atari joystick. But the problem is, wireless controllers were laggy, they weren't reliable, they ate up batteries, stuff like that. They just weren't that good prior to the early 2000s. I think they had a couple good ones for the original PlayStation in the late 90s, I think. But still, they really didn't come into their own until the early 2000s, mid-2000s. So yeah. So basically, if you had a good wireless controller, you were the coolest guy on the block because everybody else had wired controllers. You know, you had the wire, you had to always worry about keeping it bundled up, you know, worry about your dog chewing on it or people tripping over it or your little brother chewing on it or something. You know, and you had to be tethered to the system. You couldn't be any farther than 9 feet away because the original Xbox controller has 9 feet of wire and all of that. And the good wireless controllers that were out were made by Logitech. And they were expensive. They were 50, 60 bucks. Even now, a used Logitech wireless controller for the Xbox is still 25 bucks. So they hold their value pretty well. So basically the poor man's wireless controller that worked is this. This is the GameStop wireless controller for the original Xbox. Now it's not the highest quality. It's not a competition approved controller by any means. It's just a wireless controller that works. And that's all it is. One thing about it is much smaller than any other controller made for the original Xbox. It is, by all means, a microcontroller. We're talking PowerA Mini Pro sized controller. I'll get the receiver out of the way, talk about that in a minute. It is obviously much smaller than the original Duke controller. It's kind of hard to compare these two, but it is much smaller, roughly half the size. And it doesn't have the wire. And it is even smaller than the current 360 controller. By the way, this is another custom controller I built, modeled after the original Xbox. I will be doing a review of this sometime in the future. But anyways, while the other controllers were 50, 60 bucks, GameStop was selling these babies for 25 or 30, which was roughly half the price. And they did work, but they did cut a few costs in a few places. These controllers do not have rumble. There is no rumble feature in the controller. It will not rumble. It just doesn't have rumble motors. The joysticks are very loose. They work. They're just really loose. The triggers feel a bit cheap, but it works, and it's close to 10 years old now and it still works. What made the controllers more reliable is the wireless connection they used. They used a 2.4 gigahertz wireless connection, which is similar to the connection that the modern 360 controller uses. And it was reliable. You know, you get a little bit of lag sometimes if you're too far away from the system, but for the most part they worked. It has these rubber handles, and they are rubber. I'm going to try to bend it a little bit. They are in fact rubber. They are comfortable, keeps your hand from slipping off the controller. It is a bit small for my liking. I like a larger controller, but it fits my hands pretty well. And it's laid out a lot more like the 360. It feels more like a 360 controller than the original Xbox. If you looked at this, if I covered the black and white buttons up with my fingers, and maybe covered these up, it would look like a 360 controller. Analog sticks click, obviously. They are rubberized, and they feel pretty good on the thumb. All of the A, B, X, and Y buttons, all four of these work very well. So do your black and white buttons. You have the clicking back and start with the mechanical switch. You have a really nice D-pad. I prefer the D-pad on this controller over other D-pads. You have a low battery indicator light. When your battery gets low, that light will turn red. You have your power on and off switch. Turn that on, that light will flash, letting you know it's on. Sometimes I would forget to turn these off and run my batteries out. It says GameStop here. This is not made by GameStop. It's rebranded. It is made by Mad Catz. You can see there. Takes two, let the camera to focus, takes two AAA batteries here in the back. And the battery life was pretty decent. I think you get 25, 30 hours of gaming out of a set of batteries, which is pretty good, even by today's standards, better than the PS3. That might piss some people off. It has these texturized triggers. They're a little bit loose for my liking, but they work. And basically, for this controller to work, what you would have to do is you would plug this little receiver into your system and wait for this to turn green, this light here to turn green, and then you just turn on your controller and it will connect that controller to the controller port. What this port right here is for memory cards, because the controller itself does not have memory card ports on them. The other Xbox controllers did, though. As you can see here, here's an original Xbox. It has two memory card ports, which is ridiculous. But since this was a microcontroller, they could not fit the memory card slot on the controller, so they just improvised and put the memory card slot on the actual receiver. So it works well. I was playing with it yesterday. I was playing some Midnight Club 3 Dub Edition Remix, probably the best racing game ever made, and it was working really well. The lack of rumble is a little bit of a drawback. It also feels a little bit lightweight and on the cheap side, but like I said, it's close to 10 years old and still works, so I really can't complain. And if you want a cheap wireless controller for your Xbox, you don't want to be tethered to your controller by a wire, then I'd recommend getting this, especially if you want something that's a little bit cheaper, because you'll pay $25 even today for a Logitech, which I'm probably going to get a Logitech and do a review of it, but today's review is of the GameStop 2.4 GHz wireless microcontroller made by Mad Catz for the original Xbox. You can pick these up for almost nothing, and they do work. Not the best controller, but it works. So this has been my review. Thanks for watching.